I'm about to meet Dr. Samuel West, who is the curator of the Museum of Failure in Washington, D.C. I'm so excited to talk to him because he is really focusing on something that is extremely essential for innovation, and that is the ability to fail and look at failure in a healthy way. I have so many questions for him. I think this is going to be the start of a fantastic series on innovators making a difference. I think being able to tackle failure head on is where innovators make a difference. And so let's see what Samuel has to say.
Yeah, my name is Samuel West. I'm a psychologist, clinical, and last 10, 15 years worked with organizations focused on how to create climates for innovation. And the past 5, 6 years, my life has been destroyed by Museum of Failure that I started in 2017.
You've tuned in to Innovators Making a Difference, a podcast series where I meet daring disruptors, tenacious trailblazers, and persistent pioneers who are solving some of the globe's trickiest challenges using science, technology, engineering, and innovation.
Okay, so why destroyed?
Because I don't have a life now.
Why don't you start by telling me what the Museum of Failure is?
The Museum of Failure is a collection of failed innovations from around the world. So I think I have about 200 now. It's a bit of chaos, but it's about 200 different innovations. They can be products, they can be services, they can be medicine. There's all kinds of stuff in the museum, in the collection, and each one of these artifacts is a failure in some way, and they're also an innovation. I'm not as strict on the innovation part, but they're definitely failures, and they're all there to teach us about the tricky business of innovation and how difficult it is to get it right. And the museum travels around, so that's what keeps me so busy, is that it stays about 3 months in each location. Right now it's in Washington, D.C. And then parallel with that touring exhibition, I do like miniature pop-ups, which is, I was in London last week for a miniature pop-up at an innovation event. And yeah, the pop-up is like a small version of the proper exhibit.
I have so many questions. I don't know.
The food is.
So, first of all, what is the definition of failure?
Yeah, the definition of failure is, I like the organizational science definition, which is that failure is a deviation from expected or desired results. So it's not always about money. So people say, failure, it's a commercial flop. And like, nah, that's just too easy. A failure can be if you're, if you've created an application or technology that can save people's lives, right? And nobody uses it, well, then it's a failure. Or if, it can be social projects, it can be charity projects, it can be any number of things. It's when you invest in something with expectations of expected results, outcomes, and then it just doesn't turn out that way for whatever reason. Does that make sense to you? Like it's based on expectations. So if you do something, I don't know how nerdy you want to get in this chat, but
super nerdy.
Go total nerd. Okay. So it's about expectations. So if you don't expect anything, if you just don't care what happens, you're just going to try something, then it's not really a failure because you didn't really care. And you didn't invest in anything, and you're just like, I'll see what happens, then it's not really a failure. And especially if you're doing experimentation, can be very serious. Experiments are, a good experiment is designed so that it's okay that it fails because you don't actually know what's going to happen. That's not really a failure either because it's part of the process. So failure per definition is defined by what you expect to happen. And in corporate, you know, in most of the contexts I work in, you know, any initiative is based on how it meets organizational objectives or how much money you make. So those are the criteria for most of the items.
It's interesting because failure could also be redefined or retermed as R&D, research and development. And it has a less negative connotation because when you're pumping loads of money into R&D, you are expecting those prototypes to reveal areas where more work needs to be done. So it's not actually considered to be a failure, like a dead end, you know.
Traditional R&D is experimentation and exploration, and those are prone to failure in the sense that they don't always lead where you expect them or want them to lead. So yes, and that's controlled sort of experimentation, which is good.
Yeah. I mean, I just find your museum so fascinating because the items that are in there, you kind of question why they deserve to be in there. For example,
come on, argue with me.
Crystal Pepsi.
Yeah.
There are some people that really liked Crystal Pepsi. So why is that considered to be a failure? Is it just based on sales?
I mean, there's a lot of people who like the Segway. It's also in the Museum of Failures. So it's when it doesn't, again, back to the definition, when it fails to meet the expectations. So Pepsi didn't create Crystal Pepsi as a one-off thing. Let's just throw it out, keep it on the market for a while, novelty thing, and then remove it. They wanted Crystal Pepsi to stay on the market. It didn't. It was a bad product that people didn't actually repurchase. So Crystal Pepsi definitely, it's like one of the iconic 90s failures at the museum. And I mean, for Crystal Pepsi, it's been that one is, for me, that one is not even, I mean, it's a clear case. Even the Pepsi executives were like, yeah, we failed on this one. It tastes horrible. So I mean, that's a very clear cut case. There's other ones that are, the Segway is more interesting than Crystal Pepsi. Do you know about the Segway?
Yeah.
See, I don't know. You don't seem old enough to know about Segway, but
no, trust me, I do.
So it was launched in 2001, and it was expected to be a complete revolution in the way humans transport ourselves. The technology was super sexy. Everything about it was just amazing and revolutionary, and expectations were sky high. It was expected. The Segway was expected to break 1 billion US in sales within the first year. I mean, that's insane. That's an insane amount of sales. And the expectations were that the Segway would, city infrastructures in the future would be built around the Segway. So we would have future, instead of UFOs and spaceships flying around, we'd have Segways riding around. These were real. These weren't just fantasy things. These were real. Some people said the Segway would be bigger than the internet. So in hindsight, we can laugh at that. But at the time, they actually expected the Segway to do that well. And although the Segway did sell very well, it didn't sell well. It sold okay. And you still see Segways 20 years later on the street, The Segway itself was a massive failure because of that. And then you said, but some people like Crystal Pepsi. An email I got fairly recently after opening the museum was, hey, I see that you have the Segway in the museum. I beg you to reconsider because I have a mobility disability. Unfortunately, I have enough money to buy the expensive Segway, and having the Segway to move around has completely changed vastly improved my quality of life. So the Segway is a failure in one context, in the commercial context, but it's not a failure for this man with a disability.
Yeah. And also we now have electric scooters, which are all over the place, which is Absolutely. Kind of a slightly modified design of the Segway.
It's built on the Segway technology, absolutely.
The other thing that I saw in the museum is those trainers with the blade soles. I just, yes, it may have failed at the time and deserves to be in the museum. But I've met so many material scientists and material engineers who could today say, oh, we could change the molecular structure of those blades. And actually, it would be like running on clouds.
Yeah. I mean, all of these, so these examples you bring up, at least the spring blades, those trainers, and the Segway, both of those led, I mean, they are just, somebody has to be first. And these are first iterations, and then they go on. Sometimes they go on and become something successful, and sometimes they don't. But nonetheless, they are failures in themselves, even if it leads to greater technology. I mean, the most iconic failure in the museum probably is the Apple Newton from Apple in the 90s. Absolute catastrophe of a product. In every possible way. But it broke ground for what is now the iPhone, which is the most revolutionary technology in our lifetime. It's crazy. So the Newton is a failure, but then it spun off and led to other technologies and other successful innovations.
So we're here talking on a podcast called Innovators Making a Difference. And I really feel that the difference you are making is reframing how we innovate, because failure is such a massive and crucial part of the process. Tell me what your take is on a personal level with failure, because we live in a society, right, that tries to avoid failure like the plague.
Yeah, totally.
Is that failure we're making, that we're a healthy relationship?
Yeah, no, this is I'm opening this massive box here, Pandora's box of horribleness. But interesting questions where, like, are we so afraid of failure? Yes, the answer is yes to that. Otherwise, the Museum of Failure wouldn't have a purpose. But I think more importantly and more destructive is our obsession with success. So, I mean, at the end of the day, we should avoid failure. It's expensive. It can cost lives, prestige, it's time. I mean, nobody wants failure at any point. So, yes, we want to avoid failure. When it comes to innovation, even there we want to avoid failure. But when we do fail and push our boundaries, we want to learn from it. So that's that context. And the greater sort of social realm, our obsession with success, I think, is the bad guy. So I think that because we're so obsessed with success, and this is an export from the United States. I mean, America, it's before the hyper-capitalism of the United States, a person could not be a failure. Only a product could be, a bridge could be a failure, a company or a shipping company could be a failure, but a human being could not be a failure. It's only in the context of money being the ultimate measure of success, where if you don't make enough money, you're a loser, you're a failure. That has been exported to the rest of the world. And this ultra destructive focus on success and success measured mostly in money, is also part of the reason we're so concerned with failure, because it's the opposite of what we're supposed to be striving for.
So in order to innovate, should we be adjusting our expectations of success to kind of right size in order to make progress?
We need to, for progress and innovation, we need to push experimentation and exploration. Those are the two key activities. And in those activities, we fail a lot.
It's default.
yeah, you know you're gonna if you play it safe, and if you're an innovator, I say innovator because if you're playing it safe, you're not an innovator. You're doing incremental improvements. Bravo, good for you. You're in quality control. Good job. If you're going to innovate, you push things forward, and in testing those new methods and trying new technology, new ways of doing things, whatever domain it is, failure, there's a high rate of failure. And that's the only way to move forward. I mean, anything, yeah, basically any, sorry, when you said I could go complete nerd here. So, I mean, anything we have, anything we take for granted, whether it's our knowledge-wise, our experience, or if we look at technology and sort of tech social progress, it's all based on multiple failed attempts.
That's actually a great segue. had to use that. That's to take it or leave it as to whether that's a successful or not. It's a great segue into just learning more about you, because I find it so fascinating that someone who is a clinical psychologist is so focused on the effect of failure in innovation, suggesting that in order to advance in innovation, it has to be a mindset. Tell me about that and how it relates to you personally, you know, making that connection between psychology and innovation.
I'll take that. Yeah, that's complicated. A friend of mine said, if you have a job you can describe in one sentence, you have a boring job. So my job is then, by that, in those terms, very non-boring, I guess, because I can't explain it. The clinical psychology, I worked for 10 years clinically, and it's very problem focused. You don't go to a psychologist to tell them that, hey, I'm feeling great. I just want to let you know I'm happy. Like that doesn't happen. So it's problem focused, and the psychologist, the job is to identify the problems and then try to work on some kind of solution to that. In organizational psychology, it's the same thing. It's just groups and teams and organizations rather than individuals. It's basically the same idea, except use a different set of tools. And I was more interested. I was like, there's a new or relatively new subsector within psychology called positive psychology, which is, hey, let's not focus entirely on the bad stuff. Let's also focus on what makes people thrive, what makes them happy, what makes them creative, et cetera, the more positive aspects. So I was interested in that, and that led to doing a PhD within organizational psychology, focusing on how to get teams to be more experimental and exploration. And by doing that with a more playful attitude to their work tasks. If you approach things in a playful way, you're willing to have not only have fun, but you're willing to see things in a more flexible way, which is fantastic for innovation and creativity. And that led to working. Nobody gets rich on a PhD salary, so I had to work as a consultant during those years as well. And working with teams, it became more and more apparent that the fear of failure was a major obstacle. And regardless of where the team or the individuals, regardless of where they are on the hierarchy of an organization, the fear of failure is a massive obstacle. And I couldn't find any real good ways around it. You can talk about it, but it still doesn't really seem to have much effect. So I was really looking for a way to communicate how important it is to sort of reevaluate our stance or our approach to failure. And the idea of museum of failure, I I was on vacation. I went to the Museum of Broken Relationships in Zagreb in Croatia. Google that museum.
Yes, I will.
Museum of Broken Relationships. It's the only museum in the world that's better than mine.
I feel like I need to be an exhibit.
Yeah. You just do yourself a favor and check it out. They're awesome. And when I saw that they could make an entire museum out of an abstract concept of broken relationships, and actually it was an interesting museum, and it made me think about how fragile and how fleeting our relationships are, like, and we should appreciate them more. I was like, wow, this is quite profound, from a museum, which traditionally would seem like a boring place. And then I like, wait, maybe I should maybe failure should be more immersed. Yeah, maybe I can do a museum of failure. And yeah, started that 5 years ago.
Is there a solution now as a result of
all
of this work?
No, I mean, there is no solution. There is a little bit of a shift happening, like, and museum of failure is not the reason, it's just part of that shift, and I don't know if it's a generational shift or what the actual explanation is, but there seems to be a slightly more openness to discussing failure. There's a lot, because of psychological safety, that concept, which has gotten really popular in the past 5-10 years. So there is some discussion about failure and the need to accept it, especially for innovation. I think that's changing. It's changing very slowly, and in regional pockets in most of the world, failure is still something you get, penalized for in the company. But I think there's a change happening, and the more people that are discussing failure, at least more people at senior levels that are willing to sort of talk about their own failures or their teams and own up to it, the more that happens, and we have role models to say, hey, now this person can be successful in their domain or area and still own up to not being perfect and not always being a shiny example of awesomeness. Like, the more examples we have the easier it'll become. But I don't think we'll ever, not in my lifetime, get to a point where it's like, no, failure is accepted. The goal isn't to celebrate failure and make failure some kind of goal in itself. The goal is to break those obstacles to failure done in the name of progress.
Yeah.
So it's not about saying, oh, you can fail, you can fuck up, and everything's okay. It's not about that. It's about saying we have some real problems in the world today, massive problems, and there is no one solution that's going to fix everything. And we need to be willing to experiment. We need to be willing to allow things to fail and cost money and prestige in order to move things forward.
I was hoping you were going to give me like a solution.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I failed. I'm sorry.
That is me having an expectation that you'll provide an easy fix.
Yeah, sorry.
And actually, this is exactly what we're talking about, is that the solution is grey. It's vague.
And unreliable. Yeah. No, there's really no, the solution for this, like, how do we change and create better awareness of the importance of failure for innovation? More discussions about it. Museum of Failure, doing a pop-up of Museum of Failure, visiting the museum itself, it's one small, tiny step, absolutely. But we need to start having more real conversations about failure in this context, and I don't think there's any other way to do it. If you look at other examples, whether it's changed when we've had big shifts in people's sort of perceptions and values or their approach to different things, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes a long time for those shifts to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I see the glimmer of hope, light at the end of the tunnel, through the work you're doing. It's kind of novel, very, it's kind of a relief that you bring these topics up in the way that you do, because the museum feels very much like a celebration. And it's almost like comical and humorous.
But there is a lot of humor. I mean, you can't approach failure without some aspect of humor. Yeah.
And then at the same time, it feels like we're very gridlocked.
We are.
Gridlocked in this matrix of like, you have to achieve certain things in order to have some kind of validation or status in this world. But it just feels so freeing, the way in which you embrace failure. And it almost is so, it just feels like it's one thought away from like complete change.
Yeah. Actually, I hope you're right.
Yeah. I mean, but it seems so easy and yet so complex at the same time. Yesterday I was on a panel and the word disruption was used, and it was so loaded with negativity.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like
beautiful word.
Yeah, exactly. Someone was quoted, a person we all know who has been developing the electric car, was quoted as using the word disruption, and it was perceived negatively.
Because he's a jerk. Yeah.
I had to just stop the discussion and just say, maybe the word disruption was not meant to be used negatively. And it's the same with failure. Like, we all walk around with a loaded preconception of what failure means.
Absolutely.
And if your museum is just, well, I say just one way, but it feels like it's the only way to reframe the word failure, and that is so crucial.
I think that's the main point there, to reframe failure, because it's not about an open, embracing failure in all its forms. It's not that's more of an art project in some other dimension. But to reframe failure and see that there is good failure and there's bad failure, and the good failure is done in the name of progress. It's done when we push things forward. That's the good failure that innovation is placed within, and we want more of that. The bad failure based, if people are sloppy or incompetent or, don't follow the instruction, that predictable, preventable failure, we don't want more of that. There's no museum for that. Just stop it. They should be punished and penalized for that kind of failure. But the good failure, we need more of that. And as our issues escalate, we need more failure. We don't need less. I see that now. I work quite a bit with nonprofits and sort of activist organizations and charity organizations where they have a very conflicted relationship with failure, because they are wasting donors' money that could go to help people who are truly in need. It's not about creating a new computer game. It's about life and death. And they feel very locked that we can't experiment, we can't innovate within our area, because 90% of those attempts will fail, and we're wasting people's money when they could be put to better use.
That sounds like the gray area of a Venn diagram that has good and bad.
But the thing is that those organizations, with the problems they're facing, trying to solve, if anybody needs to have the permission to fail, it's them. And I think donors, whether it's government money or donation, they want to see their money put to good use. And if you're wasting the money on methods that don't work, that's a tragedy. But breaking that barrier, saying we're going to take the donated funds and do something where we're not sure of the results, but it's, we've designed the experiment to be as good as possible. We want to test something. That's admirable. And we need to change that shift. And it's the same thing. We usually get stuck in innovation talking about, tech innovation or business model innovation, digital disruption, those areas. Absolutely. But we forget that innovation needs to happen everywhere.
I think good failure should be redefined as R&D.
Yeah. I think I don't like R&D because we have so much baggage in that. But I do agree that we need to relabel. We need to find. I would love to have some kind of movement where we sort of. I can see the visual. Like the word is failure, and then we sort of break off a renegade factor of that word, of an element that says this is good failure, and we create a new concept for that because we want more of that. So I would love in the future for a organizational leader to say, like, all right, John, you've done a lot of whatever the good failure word is, so you're going to get a promotion. And then Michael, hey, dude, you just did the bad failure. You're out of here. That would be the ultimate future, to be able to have a distinction between the good and the bad, because then I think we will see a real shift.
So what needs to change within corporations to embrace the difference between good and bad failure?
One is, of course, just understanding it, the difference. I find myself, when I do talks and workshops, I guess the most important slide I have is that slide. Like, you have to understand the difference between good and bad failure. But that's on, like, sort of get that basic knowledge, and then putting that into practice is, of course, a completely different ball game. But I think so. Just fundamental knowledge about it is important. The biggest issue I say with sort of organizations, and it doesn't matter if they're government or not, is that the people who climb the corporate hierarchy are not, because of this, the organizational structure and the mechanisms at play, reward mechanisms primarily, where people who fail good failure and own up to it and learn from it, they are not the ones who usually climb the corporate ladder. So what we see is corporate leadership are usually the no-sayers, the play it safe people who are not the ones that you would expect to embrace a new understanding of failure. Because I'm trying to say this in a nice way.
They're the doers.
Yeah, the people oftentimes in corporations, and this is global. It's not specific to any region. It's the people who get rewarded and climb, who are at the top end of the organizational hierarchy, are not people who take a lot of risk. It's people who play things safe. It's not, and to get them to understand failure, they can understand it. They can understand the concept, but to actually then change their approach, it's an uphill battle.
So maybe the solution is to rebalance corporate structure so that there are the doers who just get on with the tasks at hand. And then there are the experimentalists who have that bravado to withstand good failure. And that actually explains why so many people think that AI is going to replace people's jobs, because the people who do and kind of implement the tasks, it's almost like a repetitive, procedural implementation that, AI could replace.
But hopefully will replace those.
So maybe going forward, actually, sorry, I'm very much in an AI mindset.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's so topical at the moment, but like maybe AI we have to accept that something like AI is necessary to replace those repetitive jobs so that people can become more creative, more innovative, more experimental. And that is the future of innovation, is that we must allow ourselves to fail more and let AI do the stuff that is like tried and tested and machine learned. And
no, I mean, that's there's some interesting applications of that. So where, because AI in the current iterations is very prone to failure as well, because it learns from us, and there's an idea of if with the sort of expected fantastic results and outputs of AI in the near future, we should be able to automate more of the tasks that doesn't require our humanness, which is to err. We're fantastic at experimenting and being silly, being playful, being empathetic, all these things that are sort of help us break new ground.
Being imaginative,
creative. Doing things doing things for no good reason. I mean, does a computer ever do anything for no good reason? No, there's always a reason. And I think that's the exciting sort of sphere of innovation. That's where the fun stuff happens. And I love the word disruption. So it's a good word. It's a fantastic word. More disruptive. I mean, come on. Is there anything more disruptive than AI right now?
I so massively agree with you. And actually, it's reframing my perspective on AI and the future and innovation and technology advancement, quantum computing, all these things. I'm actually I'm more comforted by this conversation and more hopeful and reassured, because there's been so much fear in the advancement of AI, so much so that we're at a point now where we're at a crossroads, where we're like on the precipice of like, shall we just slow AI down? Like, should we halt it? Because it's so terrifying, the prospect of what it can do. Let's just stop it in its tracks before it gets out of hand. But actually, I feel that if we all adopted a mindset of like, AI is requiring us to redefine how we show up at work, how we show up for progress. This is not about being taken over by robots.
No.
This is actually allowing us to be more human than we've ever been.
Absolutely.
To be creative, to make mistakes, because computers and AI will have machine learned to do things with precision. We now actually need to reframe and allow ourselves to look at the pitfalls of the biases in AI, of the lack of a holistic perspective because of a lack of diversity, a lack of inclusion in AI, like all this kind of stuff. And oh my gosh, it just requires such a quantum shift in our approach to progress.
And I think what you're talking about is it's not, is it like 2 years ago? It's not that long ago. It's like, oh no, AI, it's horrible. We have to, like you're saying, we have to limit it. We have to, like, it's going to take over. It's going to be horrible. And there's some, used in the wrong way, it's already proven to be horrible. But every technology is the same way. There's not any difference here. If we want the good stuff, we need to accept the bad stuff as well. But let's be smart. I don't want an AI robot operating on my eye. For some reason, I want a human on there, even if they err, right? Maybe not. We'll see. I see you're skeptical, but But I think it's not about AI replacing and taking over. It's about us using the best parts of AI, and we have to be able to experiment. I remember in the Museum of Failure, we have Microsoft's early attempt at AI with Tay, Tay. It was a chatbot on Twitter, and I think it was a she. And Tay, they released Tay, and within minutes, Tay became a racist, horrible person, learning from the worst of Twitter at the time. And it was immediately shut down because they couldn't control it. And people were laughing at, oh, AI is so crude, and it's such a, there's not much future because look what happened. But that's understanding the whole thing completely wrong. It was an experiment. It didn't hurt anybody. So a robot said something about Hitler on Twitter. So what? Let it do it. It was an experiment. It didn't turn out the way they wanted. They shut it down and learned a lot from it. And other similar attempts were huge failures. And I mean, in many ways, today's AI sort of avalanche of AI applications, probably 90% of them are shit. If you've played with any of them, you can see that they're not that great. But they're testing, they're moving forward. And in 5 years, we'll see some of those will shine. And we'll all be happy that we have them.
And I guess, I could talk to you for hours. And there's so much to be said. But I think we have to take away from this conversation that nothing is a failure if you truly are digging deep to find out what you can learn.
Yeah, no, I mean, you can't. There's at the museum, we have these signs saying the only way to turn failure into success is to learn from it. And it truly is that way. If we do things, if we waste failure, if we just fail and sweep it under the carpet and don't talk about it, don't learn from it, that's a waste. That's stupid. That's failure for sure. Yeah. If we fail and we learn from it and we can improve on things, I can't see how that is so bad. I think it's beautiful, actually.
It is beautiful, but it's also a very inner journey. And, my podcast in a previous life was actually called Innovation. Purely because I just find that in order for innovation to happen, it truly has to be an inner journey with many people collaborating who are all on that inner journey of evolution and progress, and not jumping on that bandwagon that's in the media that is constantly trying to sensationalize, put a dark veil over everything, doom and gloom. Yeah. But instead, innovation has to happen with a sense of hope and lightness and doing good. And so many people have criticized me for trying to live in a very idealistic world. But I truly believe that innovation has to be done through goodness.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm sure many people might, step in and say, well, the atomic bomb was developed, nuclear fusion.
Yeah, which is great. There's a lot of our energy comes from nuclear. You're always going to have the bad parts and the good parts. And it's first when we start to say we only want the good parts, it's impossible. And there's the bad parts are always going to be there no matter what happens. And we want to, of course, minimize those, but we can't eliminate them altogether. Same with AI. We're going to get a lot of, we already have a lot of bad evilness, bad AI innovation. And we're going to see more of that. But if we don't accept that some of that noise has to exist for the good stuff to come out, we're not going to have that either. And I don't know how many people today would say, oh, I wish we never, I don't know how far back we want to go with the nuclear, but we have the bomb. Yeah, but we also have radiotherapy for cancer. Who's going to say we don't want that? I don't think anybody would say they would rather not that radio medicine existed. I mean, those things are like, it's so easy to get blinded by something
negative.
Yeah, it's something, and making people are stupid. They don't want to keep two opposing thoughts in their head at the same time. But you can actually have a thought that contradicts the other thought at the same time. Like, is AI good or bad? It's both. And do we want it? Yes, I want it. I want more of it. And I want the good stuff to thrive. As with any technology or any innovation, even social innovation. And I think if we want our lives and the lives of our children to be better, how could we not want things to continue to develop?
Absolutely. Well, the museum is an amazing springboard for mindset change, societal change, and a real encouragement of innovation. Where's the next pop-up or the next 3 months?
Yeah, I wish I could tell you. Right now it looks like London is next in line. No, don't get too excited. It's also very problematic because finding a venue that's not like £1 million a month is impossible, and there's a lot of obstacles there. But London seems to be the next in line, and after that Sydney. But both of them are very shaky at the moment, so there's no dates confirmed. But Washington DC is open at least until the end of the month of November, and perhaps another 2 weeks into December. So, but it is closing, and I don't know exactly where it's going after this. Does that? I said a lot of words, but I didn't actually say anything there.
Well, I get from you that this is something that is not going away.
No.
Wherever it may end up, and I really hope it does come to London, because I would absolutely love to take a look at the exhibition, meet you in person. I think what you're doing is so essential for evolution and progress, particularly in STEM fields.
Absolutely.
And so thank you for putting all of your skills and your focus and your passions together to create this. We just need it. We just need it so badly.
Thank you. Can I ask a request from you and your listeners?
Of course.
Yeah. I would, and especially the nerdy ones. I am always looking for new items, new artifacts for the museum. So, I mean, I have now the easiest innovation failures.
The obvious ones.
Yeah, the obvious ones are already there. But yeah, I love getting an email from someone who says, "Oh, I work in," name some really weird fields. Something weird, like,
I don't know why I'm thinking of post-it notes and the failure.
No, that's the obvious ones. You strike that one. I work in some kind of weird, obscure field, right? And then they say, and we tried this technology back in 2005 and spent £5 million on it, and it didn't work, and something like that. I love that, because those are the failures that I there's no way I would ever find those. And they're not on like CNN's top failures of 2023. It's not on those lists. So any
I already have one in mind.
Okay, tell me it.
I'm not going to reveal the name of the company, but they spend a huge amount of money every week on R&D.
Yeah. And
they built a hairdryer that has a mini turbine blade.
Yeah.
And they went from something like they had 10 turbine blades, And when they were prototyping it, it made a high-pitched whistling sound.
Yeah.
And so then they added an 11th blade, and the hairdryer just became almost silent.
Oh, wow.
And I'm just like, it cost them a fortune.
Yeah.
Figure out how to add that 11th blade and remanufacture the parts and whatever. But it's just such a beautiful story of like a simple solution, but a radical shift in its functionality.
Absolutely.
I find it so inspiring, but it did require a lot of investment to get there.
Yeah, so. And those iterations up to that 11th blade are all failed attempts or experiments at trying to get it right. And I think we only see the final product saying, "Oh, that's a great hairdryer." Yeah, but what you don't see is the millions of pounds and man hours spent trying to get there. Yeah, and I think that's an important part of the museum's aim, is to realize that we need all those mutations of the final product to get where we want to be.
Well, you know what? I meet so many researchers, so many engineers, technologists. I feel like now, if I ever have a conversation about their failures, I'm going to put them directly in touch with you, because there's no way that they have failed. They just found a better way.
This is the truth. And I mean, what I think your audience, your listeners, there's bound to be someone out there, or several, who have this is something that we worked on, last year, last decade, that they want out there. I mean, and if framed in that way, it's beautiful.
Well, what you're doing is so wonderful. Thank you so much for doing it.
Thanks.
And if anyone wants to get in touch, they can email you through Googling the Museum of Failure.
The museumoffailure.com is the main website. So, if you send an email to any of those addresses, it'll make its way to me, or just connect on LinkedIn, probably easiest.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sam.
Right. Thank you. Great chat. Bye-bye.
Bye. Wow. What an amazing conversation. So supportive of innovation and progress. I mean, it's incredible, the psychological obstacles that we have in our way to progress for innovation. And talking to Sam today, it just feels so reassuring that you can embrace things that actually we tend to avoid or be scared of. And we need to have more conversations like this, because in having more conversations like this, innovation will be nurtured and encouraged. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you fail fast, and learn from it. Thanks for listening.